Hello everyone and welcome back to the FPL Phillips YouTube channel, or indeed welcome for the first time if you're only just tuning into one of my videos. But today we're going to be trying something a little bit new with regards to FPL and looking at some statistics that maybe you might not have seen and using it to take individually the attacks and the defences of some of the top teams in the league, seeing who's got the best fixtures and the best chances of, first of all, scoring the most goals, and second of all, getting the most clean sheets, in order to kind of divide, I suppose, although there is some overlap, of course, the attacks and the defences of each of these sides, and then taking a look at some of the key options from these teams, putting them up against each other, and kind of using it to assess and give my thoughts on which players I'm going to be taking in my FPL team this year. And side note and quick disclaimer, I suppose, I'm trying to do things a little bit differently in FPL, have some fun with my team, break away from the template, if you will, and that's what I'll be doing in this video, discussing some of the options who you might not be seeing in a lot of FPL teams, but me putting forward a case as to why I might be having them in my side. So yeah, as you can see to the left of me right now, we've got the over 2 goals percentages taken from DraftHound. If you want to check out all the tools they've got, the link is down below in the description if you'd like to use that one. It is my affiliate link, just as a disclaimer. But we've got Man City and Arsenal at the top, unsurprisingly. They've got some very nice fixtures to kick off the season in these first 5 game weeks that you can see on screen, followed up by the likes of Liverpool, Spurs, these teams that you would expect to have in. But first of all, we're going to jump into having a look at the Manchester City attack, and there's one attacker in particular that I'm a big advocate for. And that player is going to be Phil Foden, who you're unsurprisingly seeing in probably a lot more FPL teams right now. And that is simply because that Riyad Mahrez has now departed Manchester City. It sparked even more people's interest in going for the Englishman. For 7.5 million, I think he offers a complete bargain with the kind of less competition he's got now essentially at Manchester City, unless they bring some more people in. There's kind of a gap on the right at the moment, as well as a gap through the middle where Kevin De Bruyne is out with that injury struggle. He can be deployed off the right where his data looks even better per 90 than on the left, although it is a smaller sample size. Even through the middle, we saw how threatening he looked in the Champions League final. He looks like he's had some practice in playing that position for sure. And yeah, he could offer a big threat even through the middle of the pitch where we don't really have any data to show what he could look like through there as an FPL option, but the eye test, he more than certainly passes it. And when we look at his data for the entirety of last season, so across all the positions that he played, 6.93 points per 90 is a fantastic total when you compare him to other players around his price bracket, as I've done in this graphic to the left of me. So blows Maddison out the water, although of course this is information from his time at Leicester. Martinelli, Jota, these players more expensive than him even, 0.5 more. He is outscoring them in terms of FPL points per 90. With those nice fixtures that we saw Man City have the best of in the first 6 and 5 game weeks, he's going to look like a brilliant pick. Expected FPL points and all the expected data is a little bit closer, you should say. Diogo Jota, who was playing as a striker at times, is unsurprisingly higher on XG but lower in expected assists. And big chance involvements also is very neck and neck between the three of them, with Diogo Jota out in front, and a lot of that coming from the big chances he actually had himself, the Portuguese man. Big chance involvements, if you don't know, combines the big chances the player themselves has had, as well as the created chances, the big chances they've created for other players on the pitch. But as you can see, very even really between Foden, Maddison and Martinelli, which just shows you how clinical Phil Foden is able to be, even with more limited chances or the similar chances compared to players who aren't providing as much output. When it comes to the expected points over the first 3 game weeks, Martinelli is the one who does have the higher total. 14.4 is what DraftHound have him down as, compared to Foden, down there at 11.6. You'd have to think that probably if they had the same expected minutes, then maybe it would be more similar. I can't see into the back end of that, but Martinelli should be first choice. Phil Foden, there's always a bit of speculation surrounding Pep Roulette, but I personally think that Foden will get maybe even a similar amount of minutes to Martinelli, who could be under threat with the early subs from someone like Trossard coming off the bench for Arsenal. So if I could only own one of the players on the screen right now, you'd probably see me with Phil Foden in my team. And I know he might not be as much of a differential right now and is becoming less and less of a differential option, but personally I think he's a fantastic option that you should have in your FPL team. And with that, now we can move on to have a look at Arsenal in a bit more depth. They have the second nicest fixture in Game Week 1. They have some great games in Game Week 3 and Game Week 5 as well. Overall, a very nice set of fixtures to start the season. I think it's fresh kind of in everyone's memory how well they started off the last campaign, which came as a little bit of a surprise to everyone, but that's why people are loading up on these Arsenal attackers. So let's have a bit of a closer look at them now. And when we take a look at the data, I'm kind of over-exaggerating with the title that you can see up there, but Bukayo Saka is the one that comes out weakest when you look at the data in terms of expected FPL points, in terms of all these expected metrics. Bukayo Saka isn't the one who is performing quite as well as the other three. So Odegaard, who you're not really seeing mentioning at all, Martinelli, Jesus, I know the stats are per 90, and Saka has the most assured minutes, you'd say, out of probably all of them. Very similar with Odegaard, you'd have to argue. But Saka is the one with the worst data, even when you include goals and expected goals data from penalties. He isn't matching up to the likes of Martinelli, who I know I was comparing with Phil Foden and saying maybe have one of them, but you could arguably just have Foden and Martinelli quite easily in your same draft, with lots of drafts at the moment having 5 midfielders in them due to the vast array of options that we're going to be covering a lot of. Martinelli and Foden can quite easily both squeeze into your team, and there's quite good reason for why you'd want Martinelli maybe even over Bukayo Saka. Maybe I should dare to say that. If someone wants to argue the case for why Saka over Martinelli, then feel free to do so in the comments. But at the moment, it's slightly tempting me to go a bit differential, maybe pick someone different, save the 0.5 million as well, and go with Martinelli and then maybe Jesus as well in addition, over going for Bukayo Saka. Now, there is the possibility to triple up and have all three of them quite easily in a 3-5-2 formation. Going for Odegaard even could be an option. I've seen him in a few teams, but not really getting a look in the majority of squads, you'd have to say. But Bukayo Saka, the data not quite living up to it. Is he actually justifying that expected points total you can see on the bottom row, 16.2 over the first few games? He did have a spell where he wasn't getting quite as many returns, and Martinelli looked like the better option last season. But is it enough to kind of say that Bukayo Saka is the standout and the one you should have over all the other Arsenal assets? Is he justifying his position as being the most owned midfielder in FPL squads right now? Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments, because the data doesn't quite add up to something. Maybe there's something I'm not missing with the eye test and everything like that. Bukayo Saka, make the argument for me. Why the hell shouldn't I have Gabriel Martinelli in my side over Bukayo Saka? Even if you say, and you give a very justified reason, I may well pick Martinelli to be a bit different and more exciting. But I just thought the data was out there, is quite interesting. Big chances involvements even. There's a significant gap between Saka and the other Arsenal assets. Is he the one who you should own from this side if you could only own one? And even if you're sorting them by priority, should he be at the top of that list to make it into your squad? Now, I'm aware those opinions might not have gone down with a lot of you. Maybe you're already angrily typing away in the comments about how I know absolutely nothing and do not know ball, which you're more than welcome to do. I'll be civil down there in the comments and discuss with anyone who wants to talk about why I've got the opinions I have, but ultimately, I'm going to play my own game anyway and try and be a little bit different in FPL this year, even if it means going against the grain, so to speak. But let's move on and have a talk about some other teams anyway. Liverpool coming in third. I think I don't have any drastic opinions on Trent or Mo Salah or anyone like this. I think if you can afford them, for sure, go for them. I'm more inclined to own Trent than I am to have Salah, just because I wouldn't be putting the armband on Salah a lot. I think Liverpool, even with how bad they were defensively last season, Trent did fantastically well. I could only see them improving in the defensive regard, and also Trent in this kind of new role. Towards the back end of last season, we saw just how brutal it can be not owning him. So yeah, Trent will probably be my team. Salah probably won't. That's going to be what it kind of ends up coming out as in game week 1, I imagine. But one team looking up next is Spurs, who aren't really too many attackers I'm looking at other than Maddison or Son, who I'm not that keen to start from the get-go, simply because you've seen I already like Foden, I like Martinelli as well. There are other options that are tempting me a little bit more than Son around his price bracket, although I would really like to see a welcome return to form from him. The thing is that in Game Week 1 and Game Week 2, you can see that's when their kind of hardest fixtures come. So 17 and 19, the percentage chance of over 2 goals in those ones. I can give Spurs and their attack a little bit of time. but they also make it into the top 5 for expected clean sheets. So in terms of their defensive fixtures, they also are up there too. Chelsea make quite a drastic jump. Liverpool also still inside the top 5. But Spurs, although still in Game Week 1 and Game Week 2, they have tougher fixtures in those ones. We could well be looking at some defensive options, or one defensive option in particular, who looks like he might make it into my team. And the man I was referring to then was, of course, Pedro Porro, the only real Spurs defensive option you can consider right now. Although I did see Reguilon in a kind of intra-club friendly at Spurs, playing with the rest of the first team players, which was quite interesting. 4.5 million. He's provided an option in the past, but yeah, something to consider in the future if it does look like he may well get starting. But Pedro Porro is one that should start on that right-hand side of the Spurs backline, although he's got the worst predicted points total of all the defenders in this list from game weeks 1 to 3. I think there's good reason why you could give him some consideration. Spurs, unfortunately, kind of have a rough start to the season in those first 2 game weeks. You can see, although they come in 4th and 5th for the average, Spurs and Chelsea, they're kind of 2 teams who the most people are just going to be keeping an eye on, hoping to maybe jump on them around game week 3 after they've had some of those tougher fixtures. They're under new management, new systems, new setup. We can kind of see and wait as to whether Spurs and Chelsea are going to hit the ground running and see who the best options are from those teams. And I think that's why you're not going to see the likes of Pedro Porro and Ben Chilwell even in a lot of teams, just because you can kind of wait and see. But with FPL, jumping on bandwagons and getting ahead of the trend is of course something that we're looking to do, and whilst the start of the season may not be the most sensible time to do that, don't get me wrong, Pedro Porro is one that excited me towards the end of last season in that Spurs side, even when they weren't keeping a lot of clean sheets. I think even with Maddison coming in, Pedro Porro could still be on some set pieces. He's got a nice expected FPL points return per 90, and especially his expected goal involvement per 90 look a cut above the rest when we compare him to the other assets. Even some of the more popular ones like Estupinian and Shaw can't match Pedro Porro in terms of expected goals and expected assists. So I really do like him. He's an exciting pick. You could save 0.5 million by going Shaw to Porro and then have Onana in goal at the 5 million price bracket, assuming that's what Onana comes in as to cover the Manchester United defence. And although Porro might not get as many clean sheets in those first 2 weeks, we could see, surprise improvements from Spurs defensively. Same kind of goes with Chelsea and Chilwell. You can take a risk on him. There is even the potential to bench someone like a Chilwell in the first game week and have him as an option in the second one if you've got some funds left over by not going for Mo Salah, etc. I think there are options in this list that we can definitely consider, and Porro is definitely one that excites me a lot, more than someone like Gabriel, I hate to say. I know Arsenal rank very highly for those clean sheet stats, and will probably get some clean sheets in the first couple of game weeks for sure. That expected goal involvements per 90, all that is just XG coming from set pieces for Gabriel, 0.07, one of the poorest totals in this list, which you'd expect, you'd have to say, from a centre-back. It just doesn't excite me that much, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure he'll provide a very good FPL option. I'm just trying to be a bit different, be kind of watching football and feeling excited to watch my FPL assets to play, which I guess is kind of the point in the game, even if it comes back to burn me a little bit. And I don't own Gabriel, he gets a clean sheet. I'd much rather have the feeling of owning a defender who's got those expected attacking returns, who's got the potential to get forward and look threatening to the opposition defence. And even if I may well cost myself with not getting some clean sheets that the majority of managers end up picking up if they go for someone like Gabriel, maybe I'll take a risk and go with Pedro Porro. So whilst I could go on and talk about the rest of these teams for hours on end, I'm not really swinging too far away from the template with regards to most of them. Chelsea, the only real option I'd go for from game week 1 would probably be Nkunku if he looks great in pre-season, but being scarred by Havertz and Werner in the past is something that's maybe putting me off a little bit. Sterling as well could be an option, but as I kind of mentioned, those first 2 games aren't the best for Chelsea in terms of attacking fixture difficulty, and indeed fixtures in general don't look too great until game week 3, which kind of lends itself to watching and waiting, seeing how Pochettino's got those Chelsea lads playing, and then jumping on in game week 3 if they're looking good over the first 2 games. Same kind of story with Brighton. I'm not edging too far away from the obvious pick that is going to be Matoma at 6.5 million. data is a little bit worse than players like Raheem Sterling, but I think he is the best pick of the Brighton bunch, although Pascal Gross, Solly March even, could also present nice options. And Ciso is the one at 5.5 million, who I would really love to own. His data per 90, you've probably seen, is fantastic. It's just if he can fend off the competition for minutes, João Pedro, who's been brought in to kind of fill that McAllister-shaped hole in the Brighton side, you would have to imagine. Manchester United, again, Rashford, Bruno Fernandes, we've touched on Luke Shaw already, probably going for Onana if he comes in at 5 million too. The last team I wanted to discuss are the one third up from the bottom. We're going to skip over Villa and Newcastle and just touch on a player from Brentford who you've probably seen in a lot of sides. And the player that you'll have seen in a lot of teams probably when the game was first launched, and maybe less so now at the moment, is Bryan Mbeumo, who at 6.5 million has been reclassified from that forward to a midfielder and presents a really, really nice option. And what I've compared for people who might not have seen it is the data with Ivan Toney on the pitch versus without Ivan Toney on the pitch from last season for Mbeumo. And now, Brentford might well be a worse attack without Ivan Toney. I think it's fair to say that's what we can expect from Brentford this season, unless they bring in hella recruitment in the front line, which we'll get on to in a moment. I don't think we're going to see quite as many goals from Brentford, but when we compare this data, it's including the times when Toney's not been on the pitch. And expected goals for Mbeumo as an individual, it doesn't really matter about the rest of the team. Mbeumo and Brentford are kind of getting more chances, so 0.73 expected goals per 90, not whole 0.5 expected goals more per 90 when Toney is not on the pitch versus when he is on the pitch. And it's the same kind of story when we look at shots on target, shots in the box. Even from a creative perspective, it does edge more towards expected assists. They're slightly better without Toney, even though you would assume in the majority of times Mbeumo is providing for someone, it's going to be for Ivan, as you can kind of see suggested by those big chances created. They do drop off slightly when Toney is not on the pitch. But Mbeumo and Wissa up front in a front two this season could be what Brentford end up lining up as. And if that's the case, or even if Mbeumo is off the right and there's another forward through the middle with Wissa off the left, I think he could present a really nice option. He's got the penalties off Toney as well, which isn't really considered in some of the statistics here when we look at non-penalty expected goals, etc. He's still above Matoma with regards to that. And even more, the data from this and expected points that you're seeing in other stats are going to be from when Mbeumo was playing as a forward. So that's why I've not used expected FPL points in this graph right here, because when we take a look at that, it's not considering that this year he'll get an extra point for a goal. Midfielders get 5 compared to forwards 4. He wouldn't get any of the clean sheet points. I think it was something like 12 clean sheets that Brentford kept last year. He wouldn't have got any of the points for those last year, whereas he would have done this year. So that's an extra however many points just from that. I think it's 19 odd points he would have got extra last season just from being reclassified in this new position. And so I can't stress that enough. Be careful when you're looking at expected FPL points for players who have moved positions, because they're not going to be recalibrated, because things like bonus points can't change past the end of the season, and you can't predict where someone would have come with regards to that, if that makes sense for all of you. But yeah, bottom line is that I think Mbeumo still looks fantastic. One thing is that Brennan Johnson and some other forwards are being linked to Brentford right now. Brennan Johnson, in fact, has also been one reclassified. He was at Forest, of course, last season as a forward. He's now a midfielder who could end up a £6 million starting striker for Brentford. And so either way, I think if Brennan Johnson joins, he could present a really, really nice option, despite the fact he might not have penalties. And Mbeumo at Brentford right now looks brilliant. Even if Brennan Johnson comes in, he's still got those penalties. And I think I'll probably end up starting with Mbeumo or maybe even Brennan Johnson if he ends up signing. So it's very tight, don't get me wrong. Karim Matoma looks fantastic. Raheem Sterling is another one I'm considering. But Mbeumo right now is one that's dropping out of a lot of teams, and you're not seeing in a lot of these updated draft videos. I know the first fixture isn't the most enticing up against Spurs and whatnot, but Mbeumo, I think, is still going to provide a really, really nice option this season. I'm not going to get bored of him. He's still in my team alongside Foden, alongside Martinelli. And yeah, I hope maybe I've given you some food for thought with this video. Let me know down below in the comments if you've got anything you'd like to discuss, or if you've got any points or arguments you'd like to present to the table for why my options are good picks, or indeed why they're not good picks and who you're going for instead. The template is always the template for a reason. Do not get me wrong. I understand that fully. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Leave a thumbs up on the video if you did enjoy it. And if you're new around here, feel free to subscribe. But I'll catch you all in the next one. Goodbye.